Good morning, folks. We have a great show for you today. You're really going to love this. We've got a special guest waiting in the wings, ready to go. You guys, you know him, you love him. Phil from Kyiv. He is super excited to have Phil here because there's a lot going on in Ukraine right now, folks. There's a lot going out from Ukraine. And so we're going to bring Phil in right away because I don't want to waste his time. He's literally coming to us from Ukraine. It's his evening there, so we're going to get right to it. So, folks, fill your mugs. Grab your pen and paper for the roundtable at the end of the show, and let's do this. I've got to start with a question, my friend. Do you prefer Philip or Phil?
Phil's fine, Paul. Phil's just fine.
I am so glad you're here. I have. There's been so much going on with Ukraine, and I'll be honest with you. The media, the corporate media here, just has forgotten Ukraine. They're just not talking about the things that are going on there, and it's huge right now, folks. I mean, Phil. I mean,
yeah,
we've got the race to winter here.
Yeah, it's difficult because I used to work for those guys. I was just for your audience's background, I was a news producer for CBS News, 60 Minutes, what have you, for 15, 20 years, give or take, both freelance and on contract. And then I worked for other news organizations. My resume includes Voice of America, ABC, NBC, CNN, a gun for hire, basically. So I know those guys, and I know that the guys on the ground here are doing hard work. They're going out there and getting shot at, and all the rest of it, and meeting the requirements of their bosses in New York or London or wherever. But sadly, the news media is broken, and I knew it my entire career. And thankfully, I made some investments, and I was kind of able to get away, and I was in the process of retiring, and then this war broke out, and I have a deep love for Ukraine. So it's one last hurrah for me. So I'm hoping it's my last war, but I couldn't stay away. But I know what those guys are going through that are trying to cover the war here, but it's the old saying, and I'm going to age myself here, but don't hate the game, don't hate the player, hate the game. Those guys, the corporate news is built to make money. It's not built to provide you with information.
News is not a loss leader anymore.
No, I mean, I have a buddy of mine who also retired, and he tells the story of a CBS executive producer with Walter Cronkite, who came in the mid '80s and said, I've got good news and I've got bad news, and the team said, well, what's the good news? And the guy said, for the first time in its history, CBS News has turned a profit. And then they said, okay, well, what's the bad news? And he said, for the first time in its history, CBS News has made a profit, and they're going to want more. They're going to want it again. It's become a money-making thing. And it doesn't make a lot of money to put somebody in this part of the world until, of course, it flares up like this. So sadly, I think you're right. I think the American audience is being, in particular, the American audience is being disserved by the media in their coverage here. And that's not just because I'm here trying to do it a different way, but that's part of it.
But speaking of making money, that's a perfect segue. We've had Walt Isaacson has written a biography on Elon Musk. And folks, if you don't know Walt Isaacson, he is a great biographer. He wrote a biography. He wrote Steve Jobs' biography. He one of the best books you can buy if you're ever interested in history. That's what Wall, that makes such a good biographer. Wall is an actual historian. I mean, he is a great biographer. His book on Leonardo da Vinci is considered one of the best. If you ever just want to learn about Leonardo da Vinci, he's come out with a biography on Elon Musk, and boy, howdy, has the scandal broken because Ukraine's pissed. Phil,
Yeah.
I mean, have you heard?
Yeah,
their response to.
I talked to my friends, contacts, colleagues, all the rest of it here. I mean, what Musk did apparently is, I mean, well, Musk has done a lot of things here during the war, but the thing that has everybody in Ukraine furious right now is that apparently there was an attack in progress by Ukrainian forces against the Black Sea Fleet, the Russian Black Sea Fleet, and they were using drones that utilized Musk's Starlink satellite internet provider, and Musk turned it off in the middle of the operation, and so the drones defaulted to return to base, and so the attack was scuttled, and the Ukrainians got on the blower to Starlink and said, what's going on, and they wouldn't turn the internet back on, so they couldn't conduct this attack. And apparently later on, Musk said, I don't want to be part of, that's one of the drones there. I don't want to be I don't want to be an active participant in offensive operations. Well, that's all well and good, except for the fact that you are taking aside how many Ukrainian lives were subsequently lost because, in particular, missile cruisers, these battleships, these capital-sized ships that the Russians have based in Sevastopol were the target. And those are the things that shoot cruise missiles. I've been shot at, Paul, by those boats. I mean, I know it.
Well, calibers are no joke. Calibers are no joke. Those
Caliber
actually, I don't rave a lot about what, Russia can build some technically advanced thing. I mean, these guys can be good when the system isn't screwing them over. Like the Armada. It's a great design for a tank. Yeah, but you've got the system where they've got to field test it. Turns out it's crap in the field, but by the time they come up with the fourth or fifth iteration of it, it's going to be an incredible tank. And the same thing with the Caliber cruise missile. It may have started out a piece of dog crap, but it is good. I mean, it is good.
It's a hypersonic missile. I was in Odessa when a Caliber missile came in one time, and I've been under fire by artillery many times in my life, and it was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It's a very different kind of beast. The impact is so severe because it's traveling at such speed that it creates this almost like a sonic boom effect when it explodes. It's a very dangerous weapon. Now we've shown that the Patriot anti-ballistic missile system can knock those things down, thankfully, because there are now Patriots in Kiev. So,
which America really did. We really didn't want to announce that just yet, but they're working.
Yeah, but I have footage, Paul, I have footage of the Patriot missile system working, and I've been reluctant to put it out there because you could target based on the footage I had. You could, if you were Russian, you could triangulate where you saw the missiles going up and hit them. Now they inevitably, I'm sure moved them within 72 hours of me filming them. But I do have footage of the Patriots working, and they're impressive. Boy, is the Patriot a great system.
I kind of have to laugh at the intelligence surrounding these things because the Russians are they're very bold about we have this system that will do this and this, that, and the other, and the Americans were like, oh no, what are we gonna do?
Yeah.
We don't have anything to counter that.
Yeah.
Oh no! And then all of a sudden, here comes a Caliber missile, and Patriots like, and then you'd think we'd be like, we got this. No, they were like, didn't happen. Nope, didn't happen.
Yeah. Thankfully we've got that. But to take it back to what Musk did was he enabled those missile cruisers to live to fight another day, and they've been the Patriot system over Kiev has been great when those calibers come in, and it has defended the capital. But you think about Odessa, you think about Zaporizhia, you think about all these littler cities that you can't put a Patriot everywhere. I mean, we just had a market hit out near Kramatorsk, out in the east.
What is it to total up to now? 17 now?
Dead, something like that at last count, including children. And that was a cruise missile coming from the Black Sea. And that's on Musk. In some ways, that's on Musk. So you can understand why Ukrainians are not exactly thrilled with Elon Musk. The Starlink system has been a great assistance. Wonderful for logistics, for command and control, all those really important things. But when Musk can turn it on and off, at a whim, because he's being fickle, because he's being weak-kneed about supporting Ukraine. It's either give it to us or don't give it to us, but don't turn it on and off, because then we can't. The Ukrainians say plan for an attack utilizing Starlink, because we don't know if you're going to be
that's what pisses me off about this. You've got Elon just basically lying. I mean, the Ukrainians are when you look at the old Soviet Union, the Ukraine was the jewel. I mean, their generals are the best on the field. They really are. Their troops are the best on the field. Ukraine was the gem and continues to be an amazing country. They are an amazing country. Yeah. I mean, historically, you're absolutely right. Going back through all of history, Poland and Ukraine and this entire area, some of the best warrior knights ever came out of this region, and they're not dumb. They're not dumb. They did not launch a fleet of drones with the understanding that they did not yet have the ability to communicate with those drones all the way to Sevastopol. And that really just is setting me up, because, Elon's trying to spin this now because, he had great press. He did, like you were talking about. Viasat, Russia took out Viasat in Ukraine. Ukraine's communications were decapitated. They were, here comes Elon Musk. I've got Starlink, use Starlink, and put this image out that he was funding this all out of his own pocket, and which just wasn't true. It just wasn't true. The U.S. Agency for International Development put up the funds. They bought anywhere. It ranges from 2,000 to 5,000, depending on who you talk about. And they didn't say much about it because, again, for intelligence reasons, you don't just advertise that we're using the U.S. Agency for International Development to pay for a new internet system in Ukraine to fight Russia. You don't. But these claims by Elon Musk that, I didn't want to be in a war. How did I end up in a war? Well, dumbass, they've been using your system to target artillery from, the moment it arrived. Yeah. One, you're claiming that you did this all out of your pocket and this, that, and the other. And it turns out, that's BS. The federal government paid for a lot of it. The French and the Polish both covered costs as far as getting these things to Ukraine. I mean, and then here Elon Musk is, I'm a white knight. I did this wonderful thing. And then he sits down with the Russian ambassador. And the next day during an attack,
he speaks fluent Russian.
Yeah.
this is another reason why we can't rely on these heads of these corporations and in particular Musk. Okay, so like you talk to Lockheed, you talk to Raytheon, you're talking to a corporation that has a board. When it comes to Starlink and the like, you're really talking with Musk, and Musk is erratic. He's wishy-washy, and it's dangerous to rely on one guy who can wake up one day and decide I'm not gonna do this, or I'm not gonna do that. It's a big risk, and in my personal opinion, we shouldn't be relying on Musk's Starlink. We should have a system in place provided by a defense provider that is more reliable than some nutter.
This is why I say this all the time. Democrats want to govern. Republicans cannot govern. Democrats look at situations, and you didn't have Joe Biden run out, I'm fixing this. I'm the guy. I'm making this happen. No, they quietly told the Defense Department, you will contract with Elon Musk and you will control the specifics of that contract. It's not going to go through USAID anymore. It's not. So now the contract has moved to the Defense Department, and the Biden administration will be telling Elon Musk, this is the parameters. This is how it will work. No more, you can't run drones through the Starlink system. Because that was another thing he was doing, Phil, is he was specifically targeting the code that, whenever they would recognize code that was controlling drones, they would shut it down. What is the difference to me? You've got the Ukrainians utilizing Starlink to target artillery, and thank God I'm hearing they're getting ATACMS now. Have you heard that?
I did hear that. I don't know if it is official yet, but the scuttlebutt is. The last I checked, it was still scuttlebutt. It was still in, that all indications are that this will happen. I haven't seen an official announcement from either the White House or the Pentagon, which is where it would normally come from. I haven't seen an actual press release saying we're giving these things.
And I don't think we will till they announce the next aid
package. Till probably it's already here, or it's operational security. But it's my understanding we're getting them. And the important thing is that if the Ukrainians get ATACMS, they're also probably then going to be getting systems from other NATO nations, in particular Germany. Germany has a system called I'm going to gap on it, but they have a similar system to the ATACMS, and and the Germans have said, as they did with their tanks, we're not going to take the lead on this because of a variety of reasons, not least of which German munitions in Ukraine are historically a tricky thing. But they waited until we gave Abrams to give the Leopards, and I think they're waiting until the ATACMS come for them to send their system, whatever it is. And again,
I tell you, I'm really disappointed of the timing of this, because the Ukrainians are up against it. I mean, everybody's trying to hold. The Russians are trying to hold everything they can. The Ukrainians are trying to take everything they can, because general winter is on the way, man. It's not like here in Texas. We could fight in the wintertime here in Texas. Hell, you might get a 70-degree day here in the middle of winter. You know what I mean? But it's not like that in the Ukraine, man. General winter is a serious force to be reckoned with, and we're running up against that.
Yeah, we got about another month. I think I saw Miley came out and said that he thought there was another month left. I don't know. Look, it isn't going to stop completely when October rolls around, but it's going to slow down, and there will be a period of time when everything will turn to slush and mud and rain, and that will make maneuvering armor very difficult. But they'll keep fighting. But the big counteroffensive that everybody was anticipating for this summer period, the spring and summer period, the criticism of that counteroffensive, and allow me just to say a couple of things about the counteroffensive.
Totally unwarranted criticism.
We're asking the Ukrainians to do this without air power.
Yeah.
We did not give them the F-16s. I argue we should have given the F-16s a long time ago, but it is what it is. They're finally going to get them, but they're not going to be in place in time for this counteroffensive. And we're, and the armchair generals and the pearl clutching kind of critics of what the Ukrainians are going through really are expecting things of the Ukrainians that they would never expect of NATO. That NATO would never do this without controlling the skies first. I've been to war with NATO. I was in the Iraq War and in the Afghanistan War. I covered both of those wars. I saw.
Phil, I've been trying to stress this, and maybe you can also, as you're going to, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
Sure.
but talk to this as well. The Ukrainians right now, I've said this multiple times on the show, but I can't really communicate. I don't know the words to communicate it. The type of fighting that this is World War I trench warfare with modern weapons, and how brutal that is. I mean, the breakthrough at Robatnya, they drove Abrams into the tank trenches facing either directions to provide cover fire. I mean, it's just brutal what they're doing, literally sacrificing their own lives, because the crews in those Abrams were dead men. They were. I mean, they were going to lay down covering fire, but they were going to die.
Yeah. They were a magnet for Russian artillery. Look, here's the thing. I mean, we
I said Abrams. I said Abrams. I meant Bradleys.
They sent the Bradleys in. Yeah, they sent Bradleys in. But still a great system. I was in a Bradley in Baghdad at one time, and I got hit by 7 RPGs. I'm alive today because of a Bradley. That's how good those systems are. So those look. The Bradleys are great. The Abrams are great. The Leopards are great. All the HIMARS have been amazing. When they get the ATACMS, that'll be great. And we talk about the Ukrainian will to fight, and it's because Paul. It's because they know what the Russians will be like if Ukraine loses. This is an existential war for Ukraine, because if the Russians, quote unquote, win this war, which they're not going to do, by the way. But the reprisals are going to be awful. And also, the Ukrainians don't want to live. I don't know why this is so difficult to understand. They don't want to live under the boot of Moscow, because in Russia, the power system is all vertical. It all goes to Moscow. Everything goes to Moscow. And it's as true as if they controlled Kiev as controlling Vladivostok in the Russian Far East. It's all a vertical power system. The Ukrainians don't want to live that way anymore. They don't want to live under that repression. And so, of course, they're going to fight. They're fighting. They're not only fighting for their wives, their children, their parents today. They're fighting for countless generations in the future. All right, that will not have to live under the heel of Moscow, and they know it. And that's why they're fighting like hell. And they, I hear all this. I hate to bring them up, but fucking, pardon me. I can swear, can I?
Yeah, you can. You can. You're good.
Tucker freaking Carlson saying we could turn off the war tomorrow if we wanted to is so arrogant and so a lack of understanding of the Ukrainian people. Here's the thing, Paul. And I mean this wholeheartedly. I want everybody who is listening and watching to understand this. If we withdraw our support for Ukraine, the Ukrainians will not stop fighting. They won't stop fighting. This is an existential do or die, freedom or oppression. It is very simple to them. So if we withdraw our support, the war won't stop. We'll just have to sit on the sidelines and watch genocide. And that's not hyperbole. That's not hyperbole. The Russians they've done it in the past. They will do it again. If they are able, as we regain territory in Ukraine, we're going to hear some really awful stories, because when Russia occupies a place, it is everything's fighting. It's brutality, because that's the way. It's like turning on and off a tap for the Russians. When they go to war, they're incredibly brutal, because they think we're naive, and they kind of your rules of what rules in war? No. War is when you let slip the dogs and
Yeah.
brutality and all the rest of it. And the Ukrainians know it perfectly well. So we don't have an option of stopping this war. We have an option of whether or not we support a freedom-loving people who are fighting for their very existence. And it's just, I am so privileged to be here, Paul. Everybody says, "Oh, Phil, stay safe. Oh, Phil, we're worried about you." This is a privilege, Paul. I am watching the birth of a nation. I am Rochambeau or Lafayette, not to put myself in high airs or to put on big graces, but I am literally witnessing the birth of an independent democratic nation that is going to change the landscape of Europe, and it's going to change Russia as well when Russia loses this war. But it is humbling to be here and watch these brave people. It's incredible.
And Phil, to just put it into the mud, under the boots on the ground, what you're talking about. This is what pisses me off so bad about the damn Abrams aren't getting there till the end of this month.
Yeah.
I've always said, okay, the Abrams technologically, as old as it is, it's not a 20-year-old tank, folks. The tanks that we're fielding that's not 20-year-old technology. It has some of the best targeting technology in the world, bar none. You can run and gun with an Abrams like no other tank on earth. I mean, it doesn't matter. Terrain does not matter. If an Abrams tank crew targets you, you are going to die.
Yeah,
it's that simple. The Leopard has a distinct advantage over the Abrams in that it is a very modular design. You can rip a Leopard down to the bare hull in a day and rebuild it in 4 days. I mean, just completely.
There are so many
and that's why
in Europe. There are so many of them in Europe that it is so easy to repair them and to get them back out fighting on the field. And Abrams isn't like that, nor is a Bradley, but boy, they're great systems. And you're right.
Yeah, they are.
You're right. The Abrams.
It takes us to back up an Abrams, and that's what I loved about the Polish. I love the Polish. God, I love the Poles. I do. Historically, people have really disrespected the Poles because they had old technology, and Germany rolled through Poland. They did. They steamrolled Poland in World War II, not because the Poles weren't fighters. They with modern technology, you put Russia against Poland. I'm throwing money on Poland. Oh, yeah. These guys are, and that's what I love about the Russians. We destroyed your Leopard tanks. Poland, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. I got a tow truck, and they're back in the field. Sorry, dude. Screw you, Ivan. Though you didn't destroy anything. I mean, because they are as fast as the Russians can knock the tracks off a Leopard. The Poles are like. Throw it up on and goes back to Poland. They run through it, comes back a brand new freaking tank, man. I mean, and the turnaround time is amazing because the Poles know, and the Poles know they want to fight Russia in Ukraine. They don't want to fight Russia in Poland, and they know that's what's next.
Yeah. Well, and they know the Russian enemy, and look, I lived in, so again, more of my resume. I lived in Moscow for 5 years. I've been covering Russia since the mid-90s, back in the Yeltsin era. So I know the Russians a decent amount. I mean, Russia, you can never stop studying. But like those who lived under Russia or Moscow, really's thumb, the Poles know, the Baltic states know, of course the Ukrainians know. You don't want to live like the Russians. You don't want to live under Moscow's control because they will suck everything possible because their perspective on power dynamics is completely different than a Western perspective on power dynamics. It is a null-sum game with the Russians. Somebody wins, somebody loses. It's binary. And the rest of Europe doesn't want to live like that. And we don't want to see a Europe dominated by that kind of mentality because the Russians will destroy the international order. Absolutely 100%. They will fill it with corruption. They already have, frankly. I mean, I say this quite often when people talk to me about Russia, and I say in our arrogance at the end of the Cold War, we presupposed that it would be our system headed east. And what actually happened in many ways, not, nothing is absolute, but in many ways, instead of our system going east, their system of corruption and brutality went west and infiltrated so many. You go to Paris, the largest Russian Orthodox church in the world outside of Russia is in Paris. And that is a big FU. That's a big middle finger. It was a Putin project, and he did it on purpose to put it in the City of Lights, the center of Western, arguably one of the cornerstones of Western civilization. And there's the biggest Russian Orthodox church is there. And that's a big FU. You go to London. There's
Londongrad. Yeah.
Londongrad. I lived in London for many, many years. The Russian oligarchs have bought up huge chunks of the city, the ritzier, the more expensive real estate, and it's just sitting empty because it's just a way to money launder, in essence. Look what Trump was doing in Manhattan with all the former Soviet. Their system came west, and it's been a long time coming. And those of us who have studied Russia for a long time have been saying this for decades, is that they are a poison. What has happened is that the system at the tail end of the Soviet era, which has now been continued by a freaking KGB agent who became a president of one of the largest countries on the planet, that system of corruption and brutality seeped into ours. And there's, look at Trump and his relationship with all those oligarchs.
Well, people don't understand, like when it comes to SIGINT, we rock. We rock. Technology wise, SIGINT, we rock. Signal intelligence, we're all over it. We practically seeded the human game. And people don't understand human intelligence. People do not understand when you say the Russian Orthodox Church in Paris, they don't understand the intelligence value of that, because the Russian Orthodox Church works with the FSB. Directly. The head of the Roman Orthodox Church is a FSB agent.
Former FSB agent, Kirill, Patriarch
Former
Kirill.
My ass. What is a former FSB agent? And when we talk about Londongrad, people are like, what, Londongrad? What do you mean Londongrad? People don't know. London has the nickname Londongrad because there are so many Russians. They buy up stores, apartment buildings, everything. That value, that human intelligence value, because we're like, well, you know what, we'll make sure you get some good contracts. The Russians, Putin's like, I'll make sure that you breathe tomorrow. It's a very different system. And the Russians, as small and weak as they are compared to us, are kicking our ass in the intelligence game. They just flat up are.
Also they show up in a real estate office in Chelsea in London with a suitcase filled with British pounds, and they rock up and go, don't worry where this is coming from. I'd like to buy that 2-bedroom on Hyde Park. Here's 15 million pounds. Just don't ask questions. And look, humans are humans, and London is a town of business. And so the corruption, that's what I talk about when I say the corruption came west. All the stuff that happened at the tail end of the Soviet Union, when it became crony capitalism, and when it was oligarchs selling everything that wasn't nailed down that they could from the state. If you were a local owner of a car factory in Irkutsk, in the middle of nowhere in Siberia, when the Soviet Union fell apart, you could literally just say, well, I'm the boss of this factory. I own it now. I'm going to sell it to Fiat, or I'm going to sell it to Chevy, or I'm going to sell it to whomever. And now I'm this oligarch. And it was basically mafioso capitalism. And that is the system that bled west when the Soviet Union fully fell. And it is long overdue time that we recognize the danger from Russia. And it's not just what's happening here in Ukraine. You talk about the humans. I'm buddies with Malcolm Nance, a naval intelligence officer. Lots of folks probably.
I love Malcolm Nance. I love that he packed up and went to Ukraine.
yeah, Malcolm and I are pals, and there have been times when I've been sat down over a steak or in a beer with him, and we talk about this kind of stuff. And the thing he talks about, and he's not the only one, I've heard this from a number of people, is that the one thing that you could be guaranteed of if you rocked up at any capital anywhere in the world, that there would be a KGB or an FSB presence there. You know, you would go to the bar in the hotel, and there would be a beautiful Russian girl, you know, willing to ply you with drinks. And they were everywhere because they can't match us when it comes to hardware. They can't build the technology. They can't field the satellites, or they can't do all the SIGINT that we do because the price tag is too high. What they can do is they can send people out into the world to corrupt things. And they have. Look, I know well, look, 2016 gets everybody's dander up. But I'm telling you, man, the Russians, you know, we still don't know fully how much Trump is in their pocket. We know that he is.
Not just Trump, Phil. I mean, I want you to call me a liar if I'm a liar here. Oleg Deripaska was a freaking gangster. When Russia collapsed, he walked in and said, "I now own these aluminum factories." He set up his men there. He slept there. He took them. Putin said, "You know what? I think you're right. I think you own those aluminum factories," and he became one of the world's largest aluminum magnates there are. Fast forward to just a few years ago in Kentucky. He needed Mitch McConnell to do what Putin needed Mitch McConnell to do what he does. And Oleg Deripaska went to Kentucky and said, "You know what? I'd like to open up an aluminum plant here in Kentucky."
No strings attached. No strings attached at all.
And then immediately we have Moscow Mitch.
Yeah.
Willing to do. I mean, if you can openly, think about how much they're laughing about that, Phil. I mean, they have openly taken Mitch McConnell, and they didn't even do it like behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. And we did, pardon the expression, fuck all about it. Yep. I mean, Jesus, Phil.
For a long, long time, we have ignored the threat from Russia. We just have. We thought we could work with Putin. That was a whole chunk of the period of time, is we thought we could work with Putin, and Putin was. We thought we could, get along with him, and he would allow us to use, for example, former Soviet bases in Tajikistan or Kyrgyzstan to fly in goods into Afghanistan. We were fighting the war in Afghanistan. We thought we could work with him on a number of different things on the global stage. I remember being in 2008, I was in the war in Georgia, and I was covering it for CBS News. And I remember distinctly standing on a rooftop in Tbilisi, the capital of the Republic of Georgia. I'm not talking about Georgian peaches. I'm talking about the former Soviet Georgia. I'm on a rooftop in 2008, and I remember being on with a radio station, a CBS radio station. I said, one of the most important, and I was watching a bridge. We were on this rooftop because we were watching a bridge because we thought maybe Russian tanks were going to come over it and take the Georgian capital. Never actually happened. But I was on the radio. Didn't have to. I was on the radio saying what the most important thing is that this is a clear signal from the Kremlin that we're not playing with the West anymore. That we have our own geopolitical interests, and we're going to pursue them. That's fine, except for the fact that their pursuit of what they perceive as their geopolitical interests means subjugating their near abroad. That means Georgia, that means the Baltics, that means Ukraine. Those of us who have studied Russia for a long time knew this war was coming. When I was here in 2014, I'll tell you geez, I do get on my soapbox. I apologize, but here it is. In 2014, I was here on my Dawn, and anybody who tells you that was a CIA orchestrated revolution is full of shit and doesn't know what they're talking about. I was on the ground here. I saw little old ladies, grandmothers in their 70s and their 80s, bringing huge pots of soup to the kids who were manning the barricades. that was a grassroots movement. The people of Ukraine do not want to live under Moscow. And I was on the square, and these two old women who were in their early 80s, obviously, came up to me and a colleague of mine, a Polish cameraman, and they were crying because they knew we were foreign journalists, and they were begging us. This is 2014. Don't forget about us. The Russians are going to come. They're coming. They're going to try and take it back because that's what they do. They see us as their colony. They see us as the cornerstone of their sense of self as empire. Please don't forget about us. That's when I pledged myself to Ukraine. And I take my promises seriously. And you promise a little old woman, a little old Ukrainian babushka, a grandmother, and in many ways you're promising the country. And that's how I felt about this. This country is an amazing place and has been so fucked with and so screwed with for centuries. And it's long overdue that it has its own sovereignty and its own self-determination.
And they're walking the walk, Phil. That's what I cannot stress. Umarov.
1776.
Umarov.
Well, we are, and we need to continue to be. If we stand for what we claim to believe in, and that is self-determination and resisting empire and the idea of liberal democracy, there is no better example that I have ever witnessed in my life. And thank God this is my last war, because I never want to see another one. But this war is a just war. And this war is about a people who want to live free. It's 1776. It really is. I feel it every day. I wake up, I walk the streets, I talk to Ukrainians. They're not just fighting for the narrative that Russia would have you believe, the Nazi crap. That's all.
Yeah.
This is nearly 2 years that this war has been going on, and the entire international press corps has been here, including journalists from the BRICS.
And we know Pavel Fuchs. Fuchs paid people to go around and paint swastikas on things. That was a Russian op.
Yep.
Paid for by a Ukrainian oligarch with fealty to Russia. Pavel Fuchs paid people to go around and paint swastikas on things to support this story. But you know what, Phil? I just want to tell the audience and everybody who watches this, Ukraine is walking the walk. They are not just paying lip service to we want to be a Western society. A guy by the name of Reznikov used to be defense minister here. He got caught with his hands in the cookie jar. Back in the old Soviet days, that was nothing. That was the job, man. I mean, they just did it that way.
Well,
no,
actually,
they said, no, you're out. Zelensky said, you're out of here.
Yeah,
and now we've got Umarov coming in.
Yeah. Reznikov actually wasn't even his own hand in the cookie jar. It was because he was the head of the Ministry of Defense. Under his command, there were lots of people who had their hands in the cookie jar, but the buck stops here. And Zelensky said, you got to go. The parliament here accepted his resignation, but he still got a standing ovation when he stepped down. Reznikov is not in jail. He himself, pending an investigation, is not guilty of anything, but there's responsibility and there's civic duty. And you're absolutely right, Paul. They're trying to build a modern liberal democracy. And in many ways, they want to jump ahead of the development in a lot of Eastern European countries. You look at Hungary right now. When Ukraine is free of the war, corruption is, and they're not even waiting for the end of the war, they're doing it now, but they want to leapfrog over some of these Eastern European, not that that's the goal to leapfrog, but they want their idea of the country that they want to build is a liberal democracy that will be stronger than a lot of the former Warsaw Pact countries, not least of which because after all the blood and the suffering, after all the pain, it's got to count for something. And in addition to that, I talk about, so the Nazi narrative thing pisses me off because it's Russia that is the fascist. It's Russia that is exhibiting Nazi tendencies because Ukraine, if you know the history of Ukraine, this is a stretch of land. There's a stretch of land in Europe between the Baltic in the north, the Adriatic in the southwest, and the Black Sea in the southeast. It's this triangle where empires have clashed and they've moved through this territory. and it's the cause of both.
Hell, it goes back to the Greeks, man.
That's going back. The Greeks, the Ottomans, the Swedes, the Polish-Lithuanian Empire, the Habsburgs. Just look at your history, European history. This is the last stretch of that territory. And once this is resolved, finally and completely, which this war will resolve, that's going to end this unanswered question within Europe, and it will build a better Europe, which as a further effect will build a better transatlantic relationship. So this country has been this stretch of European territory where empires have crossed through. And because of that, they've left their various peoples and their various cultures. This is a multicultural country because of other empires crossing through. Moscow.
And they're committing to it, Phil.
Conquest. Sorry?
They're committing to it. They're paying for it with blood. They are all in. I mean, you look at Umarov. This guy is not a sleaze by any means, man. He has great Western ties. He is. If you wanted to pick a guy for a future of Ukraine to be the defense minister there, so that we didn't end up with some sort of, Moscow 2.0 situation, Umarov is the guy you want. He is not a totalitarian in any stretch of the imagination.
No, and people are complaining that there may not that the upcoming elections in 2024 may be delayed. Well, that would be under martial. So we're currently under martial law, which was designated by the parliament. It was agreed upon. It was voted upon. And it was decided that during this period of war that we would go under martial law. It's understandable. So legally they can do this. They can push the election back, but they realize how that would look. So they're trying to figure this out. Further complicating it, though, is what do you do about all the Ukrainians who won't be able to vote out in the Donbass, in the occupied territory? That calls into the legitimacy of the vote as well. But the important thing is, Paul, you're absolutely 100% right. And I see it every single day. I talk to Ukrainians. And these are Ukrainians who have a vision of their country that is, again, it's so humbling. And I get emotional talking about it because it's so beautiful to see. These people legitimately want to build something that every American should support. If you're a true American and you believe in our Constitution and you believe in the ideals of liberal democracy and Jeffersonian democracy, that's what they're trying to build here. And they're serious about it. It's not a joke. They don't want to just be Moscow 2.0. You're right. It's a definitive decision. They have decided the kind of country that they want to build based on their history, based on multiculturalism that has existed here for centuries because of all these sad, tragic history stories of, oh man, Zelensky. I mean, this is,
again, goes right to this. Zelensky is not anything like any type of old school.
That man is not Jewish. He went to Yom Kippur to celebrate with the chief rabbi of Ukraine, because there are Jewish people in uniform fighting under him, and he respects the people who fight for the armed forces of Ukraine. The armed forces of Ukraine made Eid el-Fitr, the Muslim New Year holiday. That is officially that is observed by the armed forces of Ukraine officially. You don't see that in Russia. So don't give me
I believe in the history books. I believe the history book are going to look at Zelensky and his ascension to power in Ukraine, just like they do with Georgy Zhukov in Stalingrad. You had horrific policies in place, that were not as bad in Ukraine. Don't get me wrong. I'm not comparing the Ukrainian military to what the Russians were doing in Stalingrad. I'm not doing that. But I am saying the change. Like, you had Zhukov come in that said, okay, we're going to stop shooting our own people. Yeah, we're going to stop doing that. We're going to stop sending waves of men to die, just hoping that somebody, maybe breaks through. I don't know. That change in mindset. Zelensky is a modern, brilliant, educated general that understands how to get somebody to want to cross that horrific battlefield, that sees his comrades going into trench frickin' warfare and wants to be there with them. That's the kind of leader that
clearly has a love and respect for his soldiers. Clearly, the man is an incredible military leader. And you're right. I think when we look back on this, his part in this war he's going to be compared with some of the great generals in history.
Compare this to what Putin just did. I've got another image for you.
Eesh.
This guy, Andrei Mordvichev, he is this guy. We thought he was dead at one point in Ukraine. He's been the head of the Central Division for the Russian military. Putin just promoted him. This is the guy saying, the war in Ukraine is going to go on for a really long time because, we're going to invade Eastern Europe. I mean, just says it out loud.
Yep. Yeah. I do not understand why we refuse to see the very real threat to the rest of us that Russia presents, and how grateful we should be that the Ukrainians are I hear all this, why are we spending so much money in Ukraine? Oh, look at Hawaii. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can take care of Hawaii and support a brave people who are taking the amount of money we're sending here compared to our budget, our defense budget, is minuscule. And also we're sending kit over here that was going to be mothballed anyhow. A whole chunk of it was going to be mothballed and would have been a burden on the taxpayer. It's being sent over here and used as it should be. But aside from all of that, aside from all those talking points and all that crap,
let's be honest, we were sending the F-16s to guard units to do training. That's what we were doing with the F-16s. I mean,
but all the crap that I hear from the right side of the aisle about, why are we sending money? We shouldn't. It's such a burden on us. We're sending money. The Ukrainians are dying. They're dying. These people are sending their best. There's a story. Did you hear the story of Juice recently? About 2 weeks ago. This is a pilot. Probably one of the guys who was the archetype for the Ghost of Kiev, who fought off the Russian Air Force at the beginning of this war. He's an amazing, but I never met him, but by all accounts, he was an amazing young man, and he died during training recently. And they're losing their best and their brightest. We're spending money. Go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
Go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
I mean,
you can't say it any better. They're young men that are, I say young men, but they're not just young men. Their men are going out there and dying in trench freaking. And I can't, Robotnia, everybody talks about, we broke through Robotnia. People don't understand what that means. Yep. I mean, and a couple of points I want to get to before we lose you, Phil. I mean, if you don't mind, we're going to go a little long. Robotnia.
Yeah.
Again, talking about Zaluzhny and his brilliance, they broke through the lines. Again, I cannot stress what it's like. This kind of warfare is like to people. Maybe you can do it more articulately than I can. You're talking about dragon teeth. You don't have air support. Fortunately, they've got artillery support, but not air support. So imagine what that warfare is like. You are literally going into trenches while artillery is falling. Their artillery is falling. It's bloody. It's brutal.
And yet they're going to do it. And yet they're going to
do it.
You know why they're going to do it? Because they believe in freedom. They believe in living their own lives. You don't know what those people who have not been to Russia or Ukraine or this part of the world, the Russians, when they occupy a country, everything goes to Moscow. It sucks. And freedom is a joke. Democracy is a joke. The rule of law is a joke. Ukrainians don't want to live that way. They're willing to lay down their lives. Are they happy about it? It's not like they're going off to the front thinking it's a day at the park. They know what they're sacrificing. They know that they can lose, that there's a very good chance that they could lose their lives.
Let me ask you this,
They'll
Phil.
still
I
do
mean,
it.
we're getting reports back that they've made some advances. What is it, south of Bakhmut? And
Southeast of Bakhmut.
looks like they're trying to, again, credit
Yeah.
to Zelensky. They're doing that fish hook maneuver. They're doing the same thing when they went through Rabatnia. Instead of heading straight down to Takhmuk, they broke hard east,
Around. Yeah.
and they're going to cut off the supplies lines to Melitopol.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that they're thinking we're not going to get Melitopol by winter, so starve them, because to me it's inevitable, Phil. It's inevitable.
It is inevitable. Inevitably, they're going to. The thing is, they have to make it to the sea. At some point, they have to break the land bridge to Crimea. And so a lot of this war is about a lot of different things. But one of the things that this war is about is that Russia and Crimea, Russia's sense of self as an empire. Crimea was taken by Catherine the Great, a contemporary of the Sons of Liberty, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin. These are the people who were living when Catherine was taking Crimea and building Odessa, which I was just at. And those who want to go check out a vlog that I did can check out my YouTube channel. It's just simply my name. Check it out, Odessa. Happy birthday, Odessa. I did it last Monday. And I talk about in that vlog that this was the land that Catherine took, and losing it will be devastating for whoever is in the Kremlin. No Russian leader sitting in the Kremlin loses what Catherine took and stays in the Kremlin. You think Nicholas II lost his head literally because he lost the Russo-Japanese War and he was disastrous on the front of the First World War? That's nothing compared to losing Crimea and losing Ukraine. And Putin has lost Ukraine. Kiev will never bend the knee to Moscow again. Never, never, never. Ain't going to happen. He's lost Odessa, and there's every chance in the world he's going to lose Crimea. And when that happens, it's going to be a devastating, rude awakening for the Russians. It'll break their delusion, and they're going to recognize that they are no longer an empire, and it's going to.
And to me, my prediction is that it is inevitable that when they broke east and fish hooked around and did not go straight into Takhmuk, to me that said they are heading. There's a highway that runs from Rostov to Melitopol. Once they own that. And they have the ATACMS. They've got the 200-mile range. That means the bridge that runs across is toast. It's dead. The Sea of Azov that is shallow. You can't ship through it.
Nope.
I mean, you really cannot supply.
The bridge is falling apart. I had a Navy SEAL, a military attaché here in Kiev about 6 years ago. Told me we sent a team of Navy SEALs to the base of the bridge, the Kerch Bridge. And you cannot build a bridge. It's all silt. That thing's going to fall into the sea. It's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, doesn't matter. It's going to fall into the sea. We know it. The Russians know it. It's a big part of this. So the Ukrainians are already at a place where they can bring the land bridge under fire. They can bring Sevastopol, especially with the ATACMS, under fire. But I argue, and I made this argument and I stand by it, that the bridge needs to be actually severed. It has to be broken, because it will force the Russian people to recognize that Putin's war has been foolhardy, and it will be the greatest military disaster for what was the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union in its history, and Putin will not survive it. This is not Paul. The crisis is not. I'm sorry to keep going on, but the crisis is not.
No, please.
War. The crisis is what happens when Russia loses the Ukraine war, because it's gonna, and it may lead to the disintegration of Russia, and that is dangerous. And we should be preparing for it. I'm sure the State Department and the Pentagon are already, gaming this out.
And I don't think we're going to be as naive as we were the last time when Yeltsin fell, and we were like, "Oh, yay! We're going to be friends now. Let's hug and do business." I mean, we were very naive. We were, and that's on us. We don't hate. We don't have the paranoia that the Russians do. We can do things like do business in Vietnam. Like, hey, everybody, go get some bone in Vietnam. It's great. I mean, we're that way. The Russians are not.
I lived in Moscow in the 90s under Yeltsin. I saw what would happen in the 90s with the West. The West sent in carpetbaggers. We should have sent in the Army Corps of Engineers. We should have sent in trainers and civil society, guys who could educate about civil society. It would have been an uphill battle, but we should have done that. Instead, what happened was, and we didn't instrument it, but it happened regardless, is a bunch of guys showed up from BP and all, name your industry, and they were all carpetbaggers, and they came in, and it's no wonder that there's some resentment from that generation of Russians. But we screwed up the end of the Soviet Union. We can't screw this up. We really can't. It was long overdue. The can has been kicked down the road as far as it's going to go with the Russians. It's time for the Russians. When they lose this war, and they're going to lose this war, when they lose this war, and I mean this sincerely, I don't hate the Russians. I live with the Russians. I just recognize that there's an illness. There's a real, from centuries of trauma and abuse, and it exists here in Ukraine, but at least the Ukrainians are doing something about it. In Russia, they have not tackled the trauma of the Soviet Union, the Russian Empire, the Orthodox Church. It's time for them to look into the mirror, the Russians, and actually do the hard work that was deferred at the end of the Soviet Union. I'm genuinely hoping that this ultimately will be a good thing for both Ukraine and Russia. But Russia's got a lot of hard work to do.
And talking about in preparation, I've been telling people forever. People are like, oh, China's going to take Taiwan and China's going to attack Taiwan. I'm like, no, dude, no. China is waiting for Russia to fall, and they're going to move to the Caspian. They're going the other direction because 100%. Believe me, what's available in the Caspian is worth way more than Taiwanese microchips. I guarantee you.
If I'm ahead of a Central Asian country, if I'm the head of Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan, I'm sitting there going, screw Moscow. Come on, Beijing. Not that I'm, as an American, I'm not crazy about that, but it's preferable than Moscow for sure.
Most folks don't really understand world geography and whatnot. The Caspian Sea, if in World War II, Hitler's generals were heading south towards the Caspian, and Hitler, being the frickin' genius he was, said, no, let's take Stalingrad because that'll be humiliating. And Heinz Guderian's like, no, let's head south and take their oil. One of the largest oil fields in the world is if you find where the Dnieper River empties out into and head directly south to the Caspian.
You're a Texan, baby. You got to know some oil men who have spent some time in Baku. I've never been to Baku, actually, admittedly, but I've got friends that have, and they tell stories of the bars in Baku being filled with guys wearing 10-gallon hats and talking with a certain twang. There are oil men all over the world that come to Baku.
Yeah.
Baku is look at a picture of modern day Baku. You will see oil. You'll see the cranes everywhere. The drilling for oil is huge. If you're China, oh yes, please.
Yeah.
Of course. It's.
Let me ask you about one other thing, because the Bosphorus Straits for all of history has been one of the most critical. For folks that don't know, the cow crossing. Istanbul straddles one of the most significant militarily and trade significant waterways to ever exist, the Bosphorus Straits. Look it up on a map. I should have a map for you. I'm sorry. But anyways, does Turkey, because people don't realize how close Turkey and Russia are. I mean, there are entire resorts in Turkey that just service Russians. That's it. I mean, it's like us in the Yucatan. Yeah.
It really is.
So does Turkey, because I know there have been a lot of moves. Sweden, God bless Sweden. God bless Sweden for ushering this through in NATO and helping Turkey bring them closer into the fold. My question is, because I don't have a solid answer for this, is does Turkey run back to Mother Russia, or do they continue to help the Ukrainians? And do they see the future of the trade? Because for Ukraine to ship grain, it's got to go through the Bosphorus Straits,
Yep.
and the Dardanelles. It's got to, I mean, does Turkey? What's your feel, man? What's your read?
I think. Well, okay. So the problem with Turkey is that it's headed now by Erdogan, and Erdogan is mercurial, shall we say? But there is no love lost between Turkey and Russia. They may have a couple of things where they agree on certain geopolitical issues, but by and large, I mean, in the 19th century is filled with a series of wars that were conducted between Turkey and Russia. I mean, I talk about Odessa, I talk about Crimea being taken by Catherine. Well, the territory was taken by Catherine because the Ottoman Empire was retreating and receding because it was falling apart. So, the Crimean Tatars are a Muslim Turkic people. So,
and again, people don't realize when you talk about the Tatars that they don't understand. They've heard of the Ottoman Empire. They don't understand that it was a truly magnificent, huge empire. It was the belt buckle of the Silk Road. It was
own territory in continental Europe, and was enormously powerful. Overextended itself, and then retracted. And when it retracted from the Black Sea territories that it held, Russia under Catherine, that's when they fled in. So we're looking at 200 years plus, 250 years of Russian occupation of this territory. But before that, it was Ottoman and Turkic. So there's no real love lost there.
Lawrence of Arabia.
Yeah, all the Ottomans, the Turks were one of the world's great empires, just as the Russian Empire was one of the world's great empires.
And I think that's what's dangerous about Erdogan is he really sees himself as the king of the Ottoman Empire 2.0. And, like I said, kudos to NATO, kudos to Sweden for advancing Turkey's interests and moving things along so that they're getting weapon systems and whatnot and trying to bring them more into the fold, because they've really been a thorn in our side in NATO. They really have. I mean, they have every time
Russia, our air base at Incirlik, our ability to flex our military might. I mean, Incirlik was integral into what we did in Iraq, for better or worse. But NATO, their membership in NATO is very important. It's very problematic, but it's very important. And it's also important because, well, I don't want to go down the road talking about Turkish geopolitics. I'm here to talk about Ukraine. But I get it.
But they're tied, Phil. That's what I'm trying to tell people.
The Turks are going to stand with Ukraine. I think they're going to stand with Ukraine. I think the world's going to stand with Ukraine, because if this keeps happening, this has to be resolved. This has to end. This stretch of land that I was talking about there, that triangle between the Baltic, the Adriatic, and the Black, that has to be resolved, and it has to stop. Because if it doesn't stop, it's just going to repeat itself again and again and again. And those who think that Kiev is just going to be replacing one colonial imperial master in the form of Moscow with another in DC or in Brussels, I've got another thing coming. I recommend they come here and talk to Ukrainians. Ukrainians are not stupid people. They are really well educated, and they know
they were the best of the Soviet Union.
Yep, and they know their history. They know what they know their enemy better than everybody. They know their history better than anybody. They're not just going to be a colonial power. This is it. This is the end of empire in Ukraine. This is self-determination. This is 1776. This is liberation. And we talk about our founding fathers. There. You know how many people from this part of the world lost in a fight back in the 1770s and 1780s? Well, the war was actually in the 1750s, but there was a movement here for democratic development. This was the argument that was going on all throughout the Western world, was this idea of liberal democracy. We were separated from our imperial master by an ocean. Sadly, for this part of the world, their imperial master was right on their doorstep. So they lost these wars. But there are guys like Pulaski. We have Pulaski Day. If you're a good Midwesterner, you know what Pulaski Day is. Pulaski was a Polish-Lithuanian guy from around Lviv, which is now modern-day Ukraine, who lost his war against the Tsar, fighting for the ideals of liberal democracy, and went over and got with the Continental Army. So we talk about our debt to Lafayette and to the French. We owe a debt to those guys too.
Ask your average hillbilly about the French. They know nothing about the fact that we owe our freedom to the French.
And
that we are who we are because of the French.
Called Lafayette in the South. Come
on.
Yeah.
But I feel, let me wrap this up. I know we're running along, but that's okay. I love having you here, man. I hope you will come back. I hope you'll come back. But I want to throw this out there for people to chew on. Ukraine is not Russia. A lot of people here don't know the difference between the two. Ukraine is very ethnocentric, very, very much. They are very much about being Slavs. That who they are. They do not work and play well with. They don't mind influencing other groups, but Moscow is Moscow. Ukraine does not have that history. I talked about Umarov. Umarov being the defense minister. He's a tater. He is not Slavic.
Turkic, Muslim, a Tatar from Crimea. It's multi-ethnic.
Ukraine understands diversity. They understand that they are the crossroads between Asia and Europe. They are strong because of it.
Yes.
But this is the danger. That is the rose. That is the good side of us helping Ukraine and Ukraine succeeding, because they are embracing Western liberalism. They are embracing Western style of doing business. They're rooting out corruption.
Love it.
But the cost of failure in Ukraine. If we don't win this next election decisively, the cost of failure, you have the Finns up there that are ready. They are ready. The Poles are ready. They know this means literally everybody's talking about World War III. If we fail in Ukraine, you get World War III, because in Moldova, the Baltics, that's why Belarus is like,
and Paul,
say no.
I love everything you're saying, and I'm so grateful that there are people back in the States who understand that. And I want to make this other point, and I know we're trying to draw to a close here, but I got to make this point. Is that if you really are worried about the expansion of Nazism and fascism, then don't support Ukraine, because I'll tell you what happens if Ukraine is abandoned. If once again in its history, like it has been betrayed so many times in its history, if we betray Ukraine and withdraw our support, fascism will grow here like a dirty weed. It will metastasize. It will be worse than ever, because the repression that the Russians will bring, not to mention their own form of fascism,
and the reprisals
that they will bring will be a petri dish for fascism and Nazism in Ukraine. There are the seeds of it here. Sadly, no country is devoid of these kind of thugs. They're everywhere.
Hell, look at what's going on here, Phil.
Look at what's happening stateside, shockingly. But if we abandon Ukraine, fascism and Nazism will grow like a weed here. And we can't let that happen. The Ukrainians don't want it. They don't want it. But if they lose this war, and if they are repressed by Moscow, there will be ugly guys who will take advantage of it, and they will grow fascism here. It will be like, it will be a huge boost for them if we stop supporting Ukraine. So if you really care about fascism in Europe, if you really care about Nazism in Ukraine, which is here but a minuscule part of the population, if you're really worried about that, then stop supporting Ukraine, because then fascism will truly grow here, because the resistance to Russia will never stop. That's it. And
it will mean war for us, Phil. People don't understand that, because the Russians saw what happened in Turkey. They have seen what's happened in Turkey. If they win in Ukraine, Putin will make sure that never happens again.
Yeah.
He will roll into Moldova. He will roll down south through, you've got Hungary saying, please come, Daddy, please.
Yeah, the Hungarians, suddenly the Russian-speaking population in Estonia will be oppressed. There will be assassinations by mean Nazi Estonians, which will be obviously, GRU or Russian intelligence instigated, that will give them an excuse to go into the Baltics, and then they're NATO member states. What do we do then? No, the line in the sand has to be drawn here. The Ukrainians are willing to fight this war for their own interest, but at our benefit. So we give them money, they give their best and their brightest. And I can't stress this strongly enough. All the people who whine and moan about our support for Ukraine and sending money here and sending weapons here, that's money. They're losing beautiful, amazing, these young men and women who fight this war for something they truly believe in, for a country that they love and a home that they love, and for their children and their children's children and generations stretching into the future. They are amazing young, and not, as you say, not so young people who we have to support that. We have to.
Just for our own future.
For our own,
just for our own future.
If we want to be selfish about it, be selfish about it. But we give money, they give their young. There's no comparison. Slava Ukraine.
And I understand, Phil. I understand the reticence among you have the old men in the establishment here that got intelligence briefings back in the day that had the shit scared out of them for what was going on in Kyiv, what was going on in Odessa, what was going on. These guys remember the Cold War and how effective the Ukrainians were. And it scares the shit out of them. So they're like, I'm not sending them tanks with uranium armor on it. I may face them after the next election. I don't want them barrels pointed back at us. And I'm like, you don't get it. There isn't much more Ukraine can do to prove they are now a Western nation.
Yep.
They are. They want to do business. They want to have a free society with elections, and if you don't get over your fears, we're going to make the same mistake that we made.
This country, Paul, when this is all over, buddy, when this war is over, come on over to Ukraine. I'll give you a guided tour. You'll love it. You'll love these people. You'll love the culture. You'll love they really they know what it is that they're fighting for. They're fighting for the same ideals that our forefathers fought for and which we should support. And if we call ourselves Americans and if we believe in our Constitution, we should support Ukraine because they're fighting for the same thing, because the alternative that Russia offers, and don't think they'll just stop with Ukraine, they're going to bleed their system of brutality and just binary power dynamics, the authoritarianism and the autocracy that they present will bleed into Western Europe, and then we will have to deal with that because there has to be a transatlantic relationship. Do we want a Europe dominated by Russia, or do we want to have a Europe that is a partner with the United States in the ideals of liberal democracy and modern, modern ways of governance? It's just, I don't know why this is so difficult, but I get it. Our media, our mass media has done not the greatest job. That's why
be careful what you offer, Phil. I am a massive fan of the Klitschko brothers. I am a massive fan of the Klitschko brothers, man. Talk about some of the best fighters that ever walked this earth, man. I'm telling you, I may just show up on your door and tell you, Phil, you got it. Let me
open invitation. You got an open invitation. It's a wonderful country. It's a great country. They're fighting for really true good ideals. If you're an American who believes in the ideals of America, you should be supporting Ukraine. When this is over, this country is going to be a beacon. It's going to be a shining beacon of liberal democracy. It's going to change Europe for the better. I think it's going to change Russia for the better. It's going to be tough for them, the Russians, because they got a lot of work to do. But they've lost Ukraine. there's going to be a country called Ukraine at the end of this war. And by surviving, by sheer will of resistance. And, I got my Olga back there, Saint Olga of Kiev, who's the patron saint of resistance and revenge. And, that's the Ukrainian spirit. And this country's going to be amazing when they win this war. And it's going to be a beacon for democracy. And we need to support it. And that's why I'm here. That's literally why I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying to the end of this war. It's my last war. I've covered over a dozen of them. War is a disgusting, awful thing. I hate war. I despise war. Those of us who have witnessed it and been eyewitness to war will tell you it is a terrible, awful thing. But the alternative to let Moscow win here, that is not acceptable either. So as awful as war is and as painful as war is, and I go to bed sometimes, and I'm not too proud to say it, I go to bed weeping for these people sometimes because they are so amazing and they are fighting so hard for something so pure and good. And they have to win. And so they hate the war. They want the war to end. I want the war to end. I want to go back to California. I love California. I love my home. But this war is too important, and it has to end with the Ukrainian victory. And Ukraine.
I don't understand. I don't understand anybody that supports Russia in this situation. I don't. It's very simple. You have this beautiful thing. Ukraine is a beautiful country. They will rebuild. It is just a beautiful part of the world. Mm-hmm. And you have this beautiful future if we support them and they win, versus horror,
brutality.
That's the two choices. That's the two choices.
That's you're right, Paul. That's it. Those are so either you're on one side or the other. It's sadly there's very little third. Obviously all wars end with negotiation. I want to see the end of the war, whatever that is. But Russia cannot benefit from this war, and Ukraine deserves to be free. So as long as those two things are met, the land that was stolen by force, the children, Paul, we haven't even talked about that.
I know.
Disgusting ethnic cleansing. And what the Russians have done, by some estimates, 700,000 children, that's the Russians themselves saying that, have been stolen from
that number's low.
And it's probably low. You're probably right, but it's disgusting what they did. And anybody who goes on about for the audience, what Phil's talking about is while this war was going on, and it's during the early surge where Russia was on the outskirts of Kyiv, they were kidnapping Ukrainian children and taking them back to Russia, giving them to Russian families and putting them through propaganda training to hate their own country. And you're talking about hundreds of thousands of children they have done this to. It is a war crime. Yes.
Beyond it. And Putin needs to hang on a rope just for that alone. 100%. Just for that alone, he needs to swing from a rope. Well, Phil, thank you for spending so much time with me, my friend.
Well, if you ever want to have me on again, all you need, now that we've got our time zone issues, I'm so sorry I missed it. I was supposed to be on last Wednesday, but look, buddy, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I love talking to anybody who will listen because I feel, as you can tell, I feel very passionately about these people.
You do amazing work, Phil. Please put in a plug for it so people know where to find you. I always want them to find good information.
I'm trying to expand my audience. It used to be back in the day when I was a producer for the bigger networks, I would be able to reach an audience of millions, but I would be constrained by the model of mass media. Now, we all of us now, Paul, you're a prime example. I know Boston Brian, of course, Hal over at Hal Sparks, Mega Worldwide. I'm on with Hal I'm on with Hal Wednesdays and Saturdays. I do Tom Hartman, his show on Thursdays. I'll talk to anybody who wants to hear because I'm passionate about these people. I've got a YouTube channel that I put vlogs out on, not as much as I would like because I'm trying to do like these edited pieces to try and really kind of contextualize things. I know that
Tell
the mass
folks where they
media,
can find them.
it's on YouTube under my name, Philip Ittner, Philip, one L in Philip, two T's in Ittner, Ittner. It's on YouTube. You can easily find it. I'm trying to put out a website as well, trying to grow my audience. But it's I'm trying to do something that the mass media doesn't have the opportunity to do, and that is to go beneath the headlines. So I'm not the guy who's going to give you the daily horse race or they took a kilometer here, they took a kilometer there. Of course, I'm going to keep paying attention to that, but I want people to understand who these people are, these Ukrainians, and why they're fighting as hard as they are, and why this conflict is so important. And you can't do that in a minute and 30-second news piece on the CBS Evening News or on CNN. It takes longer. So I do these kind of 10-minute, give or take, 10, 15 minutes, sometimes longer, sometimes a little shorter, but always with the ideal of this is complex and it's difficult, but it's worth trying to understand because this country deserves its liberty. It deserves its freedom. This is a war of empire. This is a war of aggression by Russia. This is an attempt for them to push out their belief in a power structure that is contrary to liberal democracy. There is no democracy, in Russia, and they want to push that out, and they want that to be the case in the wider world, certainly within Europe, and we can't allow that to happen. We are directly involved, and because if the Russians win in Europe, our relationship with the European Union, our transatlantic relationship, will fundamentally change, and it will be based on Moscow's opinion of how power and civil societies should work. And trust me, you won't want to see that happen in Europe, and it'll bleed further and further. And it has to be stopped here in Ukraine, and the Ukrainians will do it. We just need to support.
Totally agree with you, Phil. Totally agree with you. My friend, you have a standing invitation here. Anything you ever want to promote, anything new happens, my friend, you always have a standing invitation here. Love the conversation, man.
Shoot me an email. Shoot me. I will do this anytime, Paul. It's a pleasure talking to you. It's a pleasure to have an opportunity to talk to your audience. I'm very passionate about this, but it's with good reason. And so anybody watching this, Paul, thank you for letting me access your audience. Anybody watching this, go check out my vlogs, spread it far and wide, support Ukraine, and support it for the reasons that Paul and I have been discussing. It's really important. Don't get delusioned. Don't get, it's awful seeing war on our screens. Everybody hates war, but this war has to be won. It has to be a victory, because only through victory can the true, the benefits of what so many have laid down their lives for, that we'll see those benefits. And it's really important. It's really important. So please support Ukraine.
Well, Phil, it's been wonderful. Come back again soon. We're going to wrap this up, folks. We went over about a half hour, but it was great. I am so glad you hung out with us. Check out Phil's channel, because he's like me. I don't do scoops. I don't do headlines. I tell you, I wait a couple days after something happens, let it marinate, let the juices come out, and then tell you what's going on. And Phil does the exact same thing with Ukraine. Please, folks, give him a follow. The man is there on the ground. You can't get much better information. Phil, you have a wonderful day, friend. I got to wrap this up.
All right, pal. Thank you. Thank you for taking it.
Slava Ukraini.
Geroyam Slava.
All right, folks. Man, that was a good show. God, I love having people on the show that are intelligent, that know what the hell they're talking about. This is what I want to do in our community. Thank you for being a great audience. Thank you for hanging out. You'll see me looking down. I'm reading the chat. The comments are amazing. Thank you for being part of the conversation, and thank you for hanging out so long. I am so glad you were here, but we are out of time. And hey, it's football season, man. Let's see your teams you're supporting in the chat real quick as we wrap this up. We are done here, folks. Have a wonderful day. Hope you've got some great snacks. Hope you enjoy your games. See you next Wednesday.